All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're going deep on urban survival.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
We've got a ton of sources to dig through, prepping, blogs, survival websites.
Even that Wikipedia entry on survival kits, right?
Exactly.
Why?
We're talking about the whole shebang.
Okay, good.
And the mission here is to, build a practical plan.
A plan for you, the listener.
Yeah. Like, if things go sideways in the city, what do you actually DO?
Most people think about survival, they picture, the wilderness, right?
Yeah, Bear Grylls style.
But cities, they pose their own kind of problems.
Totally. Limited resources, tons of people all crammed in.
The potential for chaos is huge, GE.
And one thing that really jumped out from all these sources, mental game is key why.
Oh, 100%.
It's not just about gear, it's about your headspace,
Like that gray man approach they keep talking about.
Right. Blending in, not being flashy with your supplies.
Invisible preparedness, almost.
There's this quote I love from Urban Survival Skills, How to Survive in a Broken World. It says, "Don't run away from what scares you. Stare it down and prepare."
Ooh, chills.
Right. You need that mental toughness in the city.
No kidding. You got to be ready to make decisions when everything's crazy.
Speaking of tough, there's that Clint Eastwood line, remember? From 50 urban survival skills you should practice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He says sometimes you got to get...
Mad dog mean?
Yeah.
If the situation calls for it.
Exactly. Obviously, we're talking self-defense, last resort kind of thing.
Of course.
But it shows you the mindset shift,
Yeah.
You might need to access a different side of yourself.
Totally. So we've got the mental toughness down.
Okay.
But what about being aware? Like in the moment?
Situational awareness. Right. A lot of these sources say that's your urban superpower.
Right. So what does that even mean?
Well, become invincible. Top urban survival skills you must learn has a good description. It's like always scanning, looking for threats, knowing where those exits are.
Always be ready to make a move, huh?
Yeah, but it's not being paranoid. It's more like heightened awareness, I'd say.
Knowing what's normal, so you spot what's off.
Precisely. All right, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk home base.
Okay, because you got to have a safe place to operate from, right?
Absolutely. All the sources hit on that. Reinforcing doors, security systems.
Stocking up but not making it obvious.
Right, low-key prepping. But then urban survival skills. Navigating disasters and emergencies. They had this cool idea.
What's that?
Thinking beyond your own place, identifying other potential shelters in your area.
Oh, like what?
Public buildings, maybe underground spaces, even transport hubs.
Interesting. So it's like multiple safe zones.
Exactly, multiple options. And speaking of planning ahead, 50 urban survival skills you should practice. They talked about bug-out bags versus get-home bags.
Okay, remind me what the difference is.
A bug-out bag, that's when you got to leave home, evacuate.
Right.
Get-home bag is for when you're away, when things hit, you need to get back to your base.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Having both ready.
Absolutely crucial for the city. Those are different scenarios.
All right, let's talk about something everyone needs. Water.
Ah, the elixir of life.
Sources are pretty clear. City water, not reliable in a crisis.
Nope, not at all. So you got to know how to find it and make it safe to drink, purify it.
And that's where that Silcock key thing comes in, right?
Yeah.
I got to be honest, I had to Google that one.
Yeah, special key.
For accessing those external water valves on buildings.
You got it. Become invincible, calls it a hack.
So, I find a building, use the key, boom, water.
Well, hold on. You still got to purify whatever you find.
Good point. Especially in a city, contamination's a big risk.
Big time. Boiling's the gold standard, but these sources also talk about bleach, tablets, filters.
Okay, so secure water, then purify. Got it.
You got it.
Now on to another essential. Food.
All right, so beyond raiding the pantry, what are we talking about?
Yeah, your pantry's a good start, but long term, you got to think bigger.
Okay, so 10 important urban survival skills to master before SHTF. They break down foraging versus scavenging.
Right. Two different ways to find food in the city. So foraging is like dot plants, right?
Exactly. Knowing your edible plants, dandelions, berries, even mushrooms.
Mushrooms in the city. Seems risky.
It can be. Knowledge is power, my friend.
So I guess that's where scavenging comes in.
Right. That's more about finding usable stuff in abandoned places.
Stores, houses, maybe even dumpsters.
You got it.
But wouldn't it be dangerous to just eat anything you find?
100%. That's why Urban Survival Guide, Surviving if SHTF in the City in 2034, is big on knowing what you're doing.
Like identifying the plants properly, knowing their nutritional value.
Not just calories, you need vitamins, minerals, the whole shebang to stay healthy.
So it's about fueling your body, right? Not just stuffing your face with whatever you find.
Exactly, good point. Now let's talk about staying safe, self-defense.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one.
And I think this is where understanding the force continuum is super important.
Force continuum. That sounds kind of intense.
It is, but it's also super logical. It's a concept from law enforcement.
So how does it apply to surviving in the city?
Think of it like a ladder, different levels of response, you know.
Okay, I'm listening.
First rung, always avoidance.
So-
Stay away from danger if you can.
Smart, yeah.
If that fails, you move up, verbal de-escalation.
Talking your way out of it, basically.
Exactly. Voice, body language, try to diffuse things.
And if that doesn't work?
Then maybe non-lethal tools, pepper spray, stun gun, something like that.
Okay, but only if things get really serious, right?
And as a very last resort, in a life or death situation.
We're talking weapons now.
Yeah. And 50 urban survival skills you should practice is very clear about this.
About what?
If you choose to have a weapon, you are responsible for knowing how to use it safely and legally.
Training, knowing the laws, all that.
100%.
So it's not just about having it, it's about knowing when and how.
Exactly. But remember, self-defense starts way before any of that.
With awareness.
Yeah, avoiding those dangerous situations in the first place.
It's a layered approach, right?
Exactly, being proactive about your safety.
All right, we've covered mental toughness, awareness, a safe home base, water, food, and self-defense.
We've been busy.
What's next on our urban survival checklist?
Well, we got to talk about getting around transportation in a crisis.
Yeah, because I bet that gets tricky when the city's in lockdown.
You bet it does. That's going to be the focus of part 2 of this deep dive.
Can't wait. We'll be right back after a quick break.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into urban survival skills.
So last time, we talked about mental game, situational awareness, having a safe home base.
We even hit on some of the big ones, water and food.
But what about when things get really bad and we got to move, the city's in lockdown? How do we get around?
Transportation, yeah, that's a whole other challenge when things go south.
I bet. I mean, think about it. Gridlock, no gas, public transport's down.
Forget relying on your car. That could become a liability pretty quick.
So what's the solution? Walking. I feel like that's kind of risky if things are chaotic, you know?
Walking, yeah, it's good for short distances, but you're right, not ideal in every situation.
Okay, so what does urban survival, essential skills to surviving any disaster in the city, suggest?
They actually recommend thinking about bicycles or motorcycles.
Interesting.
Yeah, they can weave through debris, bypass those traffic jams.
I guess it makes sense, especially if you got to get home fast or navigate narrow streets.
You got it. And don't forget good walking shoes, too.
Always got to have a backup plan.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what if we absolutely need a car? Like, there's just no other way.
Well, 10 important urban survival skills to master before SHTF mentions learning how to hotwire a car.
Wow. Okay, that's getting a little extreme.
It is, but remember, we're talking about extreme situations.
True. Like if you're trapped somewhere dangerous and guy used an abandoned vehicle.
Exactly. It could be a lifesaver in that kind of scenario.
Okay, so we've got our transportation sorted out. Now, what about essential skills? Like beyond just having stuff, what should we know how to do?
That's huge. Urban Survival Skills List 25 skills you should know really emphasizes that skills trump gear every time.
Yeah, you could have the fanciest multi-tool, but if you don't know how to use it.
It's useless, so learning those practical skills is crucial.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, basic first aid, for starters.
Makes sense. Being able to treat injuries, stop bleeding, especially if there's no doctor around.
Exactly. What about fire starting? Would you think that's important in the city?
Honestly, not really. Seems like more of a wilderness thing.
You might be surprised. Urban survival. Essential skills to surviving any disaster in the city makes a strong case for it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Warmth, cooking, even signaling for help.
Huh. I guess that makes sense. And fire, it's a morale booster too, right? Just having that in a crisis.
Huge psychological benefit. But yeah, finding dry tinder in the city, that's a challenge.
For sure. So what do they suggest?
Getting creative. Remember that gum wrapper and battery trick we talked about?
Oh, right. Using everyday stuff for fire starting.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Totally. Okay, so we got first aid, fire starting. What else?
Navigation. In this day and age, we're so reliant on GPS.
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of that.
But what happens when that's gone? 50 urban survival skills you should practice reminds us that good old-fashioned map reading, compass skills, Still essential.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah,
Especially if streets are blocked, landmarks are gone.
exactly. Okay, ready for a surprising one?
Hit me.
Lock picking.
Whoa, hold on. Isn't that kind of, illegal?
It can be in normal circumstances, but again, survival situation, different rules apply.
Right, right. So this is for emergency access, I'm guessing.
You got it. Getting into a shelter, retrieving supplies.
Makes sense as a last resort, kind of like that break glass in case of emergency thing.
Precisely. And on a similar note, basic sewing skills can be super handy too.
Sewing, really.
Seriously, think about it. Repairing clothes, making a makeshift shelter.
I guess it's all about being resourceful.
You got it.
Okay, we've got this whole list of skills now, but how do we actually learn them?
Well, urban survival skills. Navigating disasters and emergencies has some good advice.
Lay it on me.
It's about finding that balance between knowledge and practice. Read books, watch videos, take classes, all that.
Okay, so learn the theory.
Right. But then you got to put it into attitude.
So reading about that gum wrapper fire trick is one thing, but actually doing it.
That's where the real learning happens?
Muscle memory, I guess. What about practicing for those big, scary events, earthquake, societal collapse, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's where it gets tough to practice for.
Right, because how do you even simulate that?
Well, urban survival. Essential skills to surviving any disaster in the city talks about building mental resilience.
Okay, but how do you even do that? Like, is it a muscle you can strengthen?
It is, absolutely. Think of it like training for a marathon.
Oh, okay, I see where you're going with this.
You don't just wake up and run 26 miles, right? You start small, build up over time.
So mental resilience is the same.
Exactly. Start with mindfulness, breathing exercises, maybe visualize yourself staying calm in tough situations.
It's like mental reps, basically.
I like that. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about foraging.
Foraging. I thought we were done with food talk.
Not quite. This is more about finding food in unexpected places, specifically in the city.
I wouldn't think there'd be much to forage in a concrete jungle.
You'd be surprised. 10 important urban survival skills to master before SHTF highlights all sorts of edible plants that grow right under our noses.
Like what?
Dandelions in parks, berries along fences, even mushrooms popping up in random spots.
Mushrooms again. Are we sure about this?
Look, knowledge is key, right? Urban Survival Guide. Surviving if SHTF in the city in 2034 stresses that you gotta know what you're picking.
Identify it properly. Understand the nutritional value.
You got it. And remember, foraging safely means doing your research, learning from experts.
Okay, so it's not just about grabbing whatever looks tasty. It's about being informed.
Precisely.
So parks, empty lots, those seem like obvious foraging spots. What about less obvious places?
Good question. Urban Survival Guide. Surviving if SHTF in the city in 2034 actually suggests checking out areas around hospitals and schools.
Really? Why there?
Apparently, they often have a good variety of edible plants growing nearby.
Interesting. Plus, I bet those areas wouldn't be as crowded during a crisis.
Less foot traffic, more potential food. It's about thinking outside the box, right?
Right. Okay, so foraging is covered. Now, what about another potential urban danger riots? I know some of these sources talked about that.
They do, and it's a scary thought.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what do we do if we find ourselves in the middle of a riot?
Well, Urban Survival Skills list 25 skills you should know gives some pretty good tips.
Like what?
The key is to avoid drawing attention to yourself. Blend in, move towards the edge of the chaos.
So no sudden movements, no eye contact, just go with the flow.
Exactly. And whatever you do, don't try to go against the crowd.
Got it. Stay calm, blend in, and get to safety.
You got it. Now let's circle back to self-defense for a minute. We talked about the force continuum.
Yeah, that latter response.
Right. But I think it's worth diving a bit deeper into the practical side of protecting yourself, especially in the city.
So what is urban survival skills? Staying safe in the city during a crisis, say.
They stress having a plan, learning some basic self-defense moves.
Okay, so it's not just about hoping for the best.
No way. And they talk about knowing how to use non-lethal tools effectively.
Like pepper spray.
Exactly. It's not just about owning it. It's about knowing how and when to use it.
And practicing those techniques so it's like second nature.
Muscle memory can save your life.
True that. Hey, these sources also mentioned Hey, I Am Radio, right?
Yep, good eye.
I always thought that was more of a hobbyist thing, like for tech nerds.
It's definitely got a bit of a nerdy reputation, but don't underestimate it.
So how is ham radio useful in a city survival scenario?
Well, 50 urban survival skills you should practice explains that ham radios can reach incredibly far distances.
So you could potentially communicate with people outside the city.
Exactly, even other countries. It's like a lifeline when other communication goes down.
Okay, but I'm guessing there's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. It's not just about picking up any old radio and chatting away.
So what do you need to know?
Well, first you got to get licensed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you got to learn the procedures, pass an exam.
I had no idea. So then it's all about practice, right?
Exactly. Figuring out frequencies, sending clear transmissions, setting up antennas.
Sounds like a whole new world.
It is, but a potentially valuable one, especially for serious urban preppers.
Okay, now for a topic that's not so glamorous, but super important, waste management.
Ah, yes, the less glamorous side of SHTF.
But definitely crucial, especially in a city.
Big time. 50 urban survival skills you should practice. Actually recommends a pretty interesting exercise to get a handle on this.
Oh, what is it?
Trying out a bucket toilet system for a weekend?
I think I'll pass on that one.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, but it does highlight the importance of thinking about sanitation when the city's not taking care of it anymore.
Okay, so no bucket toilets. But what are some good options for handling waste in a crisis?
Well, composting is always a good idea.
Even in a city.
Especially in a city. You got to recycle those organic materials.
Makes sense. What about human waste?
That's the tricky part, right? The sources mention digging latrines, using biodegradable bags, even building a composting toilet.
Okay, at least that's better than the bucket. But I get the point. Sanitation is key for staying healthy.
100%. You don't want a disease outbreak on top of everything else.
No kidding. So we've covered a lot. Transportation, essential skills, foraging, even waste management.
We've been busy.
What are some of the key takeaways we should remember as we wrap up this part?
Well, one thing that really stands out is the importance of knowledge and practice.
It's not just about reading survival books. It's about getting out there and doing it.
Exactly. Putting that knowledge into action. Experiment, push your limits, make those skills second nature.
Like a mental and physical workout, right?
Yeah.
But what about the stuff you can't really practice for, like a massive earthquake or society just completely falling apart?
That's where things get a bit more philosophical. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring in part 3 of this deep dive.
Welcome back for the final part of our urban survival deep dive.
We've covered a ton of ground, haven't we?
We have everything from mental toughness to practical skills.
We even talked about hot wiring a car, if it comes down to it.
Yeah, that was a wild one. But one thing these sources keep emphasizing is that being prepared isn't enough.
Right, you need more than just gear and skills.
It's about being creative, adaptable, being able to think on your feet.
You know, it's like we're playing urban chess, always thinking a few moves ahead.
I like that. And urban survival, essential skills to surviving any disaster in the city, really gets into that whole repurposing thing.
Oh yeah, turning trash into treasure, basically.
Turning a bottle into a rope-making tool, a crayon into a candle.
It's mind-blowing what you can do with a little ingenuity.
And that resourcefulness goes for scavenging too, right? Like, it's not just about hitting up abandoned stores.
Right. 10 important urban survival skills to master before SHTF talks about knowing where to find useful materials.
Scrap metal, wood, even old electronics.
All valuable stuff in a crisis.
Which brings us to something we haven't talked about much. Bartering and negotiation.
Oh, that's a big one.
Because if money's no good, trading becomes the new currency.
Exactly. It's like going back to a more localized economy.
Skills like sewing, repairs, gardening, those become super valuable.
And knowing how to strike a fair deal, that's essential.
So it's not just about what you have VE, it's what you can do for others.
Right, contributing to the community.
Speaking of community, these sources are all about building strong relationship and now W before anything happens.
Become invincible. Top urban survival skills you must learn, puts it perfectly. Your network is your net worth.
It's about knowing your neighbors, having that support system in place.
Because, let's be real, going it alone in a crisis, not a good idea.
It's like that gray man concept, but on a community level.
Exactly. Strength in numbers, safety in numbers.
But, and this is a big BUT, not everyone's going to be helpful, right?
Sadly, no. Some people might try to take advantage.
So how do you balance helping others with protecting yourself?
That's where discernment comes in. Urban survival skills. How to survive in a broken world. Cautions against being too trusting.
Be careful who you share with. Protect your supplies.
It's a fine line to walk, that's for sure.
Okay, so we've got physical skills, mental preparedness, resourcefulness, community. What are we missing?
One thing that often gets overlooked is intelligence gathering.
Intelligence gathering, like spying on our neighbors.
Not exactly. It's more about actively seeking out information, knowing what's happening around you.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, 50 urban survival skills you should practice talks about it as understanding the situation, spotting threats, knowing where things are headed.
It's like being a detective in your own city.
Exactly. You're piecing together clues to make smart decisions.
And how do you gather that intel?
Talking to people, listening to scanners, observing patterns. It's about being tuned in. That awareness can make all the difference.
Okay, so we've gathered our intel, we've assessed the situation, and we realize we got to get OUT.
Time for Plan B, the escape route.
What does that involve?
Well, become invincible. Top urban survival skills you must learn, calls it evasion, using your environment to your advantage.
Blending in, avoiding detection, basically becoming invisible.
You got it. Moving quickly, quietly, using cover, creating distractions if you have to.
So it's like becoming a ghost in the city.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's about having a backup plan, just in case.
Always got to have a plan B.
Always. But what if you're trapped? Like, no way to evade the threat.
That's a scary thought. What then?
That's when breaching an entry might come into play. But I gotta stress, this is a last resort.
We're not talking about breaking and entering for fun.
Absolutely not. Become invincible. Top urban survival skills you must learn explains that this is about using tools and techniques to get into a locked or barricaded space.
So bypassing security, creating an opening, getting in quickly and safely.
Right, and again, knowing the legal implications, this is for life or death situations only.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Maybe even a bit too much.
It can feel overwhelming, I know.
But I guess the point isn't to become some kind of urban superhero overnight.
Right, it's about taking it step by step.
Building that foundation of knowledge, developing that resilient mindset.
Being ready to adapt, to improvise, that's key.
And that brings us to something else important: stress management.
Urban survival skills. Navigating disasters and emergencies talks about this a lot.
Because a crisis is stressful, duh. But how do you actually manage that stress?
Well, a lot of the stuff we've already talked about helps.
What?
Mindfulness, breathing exercises, visualization, those are all good tools.
And what about physical activity? Does that help?
Absolutely. Even in a crisis, moving your body can make a huge difference.
Releases tension, improves mood, it helps you sleep.
And it can be a way to connect with others, build that community.
So it's about surviving emotionally and mentally, not just physically.
Exactly. And remember, if you're struggling, don't hesitate to reach out for help.
There's no shame in asking for support, especially in a crisis.
Couldn't agree more. Taking care of your mental health is crucial.
All right, as we wrap up this epic deep dive, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who wants to start preparing for urban survival?
I'd say the most important thing is to have a plan. Urban survival. Essential skills to surviving any disaster in the city really hammers this home.
Okay, so more than just a bug-out bag, it's a bug-out plan.
You got it. Think through different scenarios, know your challenges, have strategies ready.
Knowing where to go, what to do, who to contact.
And practicing that plan, so it's not just theory, it's ingrained.
So you can act quickly when things go down.
Exactly. But remember, your plan needs to be flexible, too.
Because no plan survives contact with reality.
Right. Be ready to adapt as the situation changes.
Well, that's some great advice. We've covered so much in this urban survival deep dive.
We have from the mental game to practical skills, community building, the whole 9 yards.
Any final thoughts?
Just this. Knowledge is power. The more you learn, the more you practice, the better prepared you'll be.
And it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving, even in the face of adversity.
Using what you know, your skills, your community, to build a better future.
Well said. And listeners, remember, the time to start preparing is now.
Don't wait for disaster to strike. Get learning, get practicing, get connected.
Stay safe out there, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.